Welcome to the latest episode of the Three-Piece Combo MMA show, brought to you by this 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm your host Jonathan, and you can follow me at Three-Piece Combo on Twitter for all your MMA coverage. First of all, I do want to say thank you, and I appreciate you for checking out the show. As a thank you for tuning in to the first show that we've ever had, we will be doing a small giveaway. To see how you can win this giveaway, be sure to stay until the end of the show for all the details. Let's get into it. So, wrapping up UFC Vegas 8, we see the birth of a new contender, we see a couple of fresh standout prospects, and we see the fall from grace for a few notable veterans. Let's start with the main event. Alexander Rakic defeats Anthony Smith via decision. The biggest questions coming into this fight was if Rakic was a legit threat for the light heavyweight belt, and if Anthony Smith was still a contender, or if he was going to take the place as the gatekeeper for the division. Rakic come in off a split decision loss, which many thought he might have won that fight. It was pretty close, but we did see that his leg was absolutely brutalized by the end of it, so no harm done in giving him that loss. Before that loss, he did win 12 straight, finishing 8 of them in the first round. With a win here over a top 5 opponent, he could definitely secure himself as a legit contender. As for Anthony Smith, he comes in off of a brutal loss to Glover Teixeira, a fight that was so violent. Smith suffered a broken nose, broken orbital, and 2 missing teeth. For Smith, it was a must-win for him. If he wanted to definitely get back into the title picture, he would need to win this fight against an up-and-comer. For Rakic, a win over Smith would put him securely in the top 5, being just a fight or 2 away from fighting from the newly vacated light heavyweight belt. Starting with round 1, we see Rakic immediately start to target the legs of Smith. It seems like he took a page out of his last opponent's book and just started to chop away at the legs. You would want to see Anthony Smith check some of these leg kicks, close the distance so he's able to use those elbows that he's so useful at getting into the range and using those elbows. What ended up happening instead is 2 minutes of Rakic beating up Smith's legs. He chops down his legs to the point where Anthony collapses to the floor, and he's unable to get up from there. And the leg kicks are such a big part in today's MMA game. We see them used against strikers that put their weight in their legs, fire from their legs, and then we see them from grapplers. They're unable to get back up. They're able to make sure they stay on top. They make sure they're able to keep that position and really control the pace of the fight, because it limits their opponent's movement, it limits their opponent's ability to strike and ability to generate power from those legs. Once Anthony Smith gets to the ground, Rakic is able to work his way to the top position, and he's able to get solid ground and pound for the rest of the round. This was the common theme for the fight. Anthony Smith really couldn't get back to his feet, and I think those leg kicks really at the beginning made this fight the way it went out. It seemed like Anthony was more than content on staying on the ground and just playing defense all fight long. Being that he did take a lot of beating in his last fight, maybe he just didn't want to take the same type of beating in this one. Obviously, off of his back, you would want to see him threaten some more submissions. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so you'd want to see him maybe try for some triangles, try for some arm bars. Anytime he did get close from opening the guard and trying to maybe maneuver into a submission, Rakic was smart to it. He sniffed it all out, and he was able to just stay away from those submissions. Rakic steamrolled over Smith, and he really solidified himself as a legit contender. Now, for Rakic, he has the ability to knock people out in the first round. Like I said, he won 8 of his 12 on that 12-fight win streak in the first round. And this fight showed that once he's able to get on top, he's able to stay there. He's able to make sure that he keeps his weight, he uses his weight distribution really well, and he's able to really use his technical ability to keep that striking game good too. So he has a really good, well-rounded game. For him, you can kind of really compare him to Reyes, because he's very athletic, he's very lengthy, he has that knockout power, and he's good to the takedowns. He's not really prone to getting taken down, as well as he's able to manage distance really well. He stays just far enough so he can kick you. He stays just close enough so he can hit you with his arms. But if he's in the range of the opponent, just like with Smith, he didn't let him get any of those nasty elbows off. He made sure that, I mean, of course he's going to get tagged a few times, but he made sure that he stayed in range of what he wanted to do, not what Smith wanted to do. For Smith, we don't know what he's going to do from here. At this point, he's coming off of 3 out of his last 4 fights and losses. He doesn't really seem to have much direction. Looking at the end of the fight, he didn't seem to know what was next. He teased at the possibility of going down to middleweight and fighting down at that division, which would be a little bit harder. He's getting a little bit up there in age. He has 49 fights under his belt, so with that many fights and being that old, the weight cuts get harder. Unless you're able to get a really good nutritionist, really good trainer, it's hard to get that weight cut down. And even if he was able to go down to middleweight, he's going to face a lot of killers down there. Yoel Romero, Edmund Shabazian. You know, even if you get to the top of the division, you have to face Adesanya. He's a good, lengthy guy. He's going to chop your legs off too, just like he did with Yoel Romero. A number for the fight that we can look at to just show how dominant Rakic was: 141 to 40. 141 to 40 was how much Rakic outstruck Anthony Smith. That's not a good look for him. He didn't really show much offense, and like I said, Smith did not look good at all. For him, it's going to be really hard for to get back into a title contention. And if he really wants to do that, he'll have to string 3 or 4 wins in a row together to be able to get there. But like we said, he has 49 professional fights under his belt. He's been doing this for a long time, and it seems like he lost his edge. Before the UFC, he was really focused on making sure he gets in there, and as a middleweight and as a light heavyweight, he had this demeanor to him, a confidence to him that he showed coming into the fights. Now it seemed like he was a little timid. For those of you that didn't know, he did have a burglary incident where somebody broke into his home, and of course, you know, that's going to be something that's traumatizing for the family, but it seems to have affected him as well, where he doesn't have the same aggressiveness as before. But for Rakic, this is now a true legit threat in the light heavyweight division, and he's 1 or 2 fights away from fighting for the belt. Moving on to the co-main event, we saw Neil Magny defeat ruthless Robbie Lawler via decision. Magny seems to be a decision king. He's really good at getting those decisions and taking the fight all the way. As for Lawler, he came in 1-4 in his last 5 fights, with his last win being 3 years ago. If he wanted to still be relevant, this was going to have to be a must-win for him. Magny comes in, winning 2 in a row, and he seemed primed to attempt a late career title push into contention. He seemed to kind of already put it all together, winning 4 of his last 5. And the biggest question coming in for Neil Magny was if he was able to beat top contenders. Obviously, he did have a canceled bout, and Robbie stepped in on short notice. But for Neil Magny, this is going to be a good opportunity to get a win over a big name. The biggest question for Robbie was, is he still ruthless? Is he still the fighter that we've known to grow and love? The guy that gets punched in the face and gets happy that he's getting punched in the face. The guy that can come back, down rounds, win fights at the end of them. And we see the answer was no. We didn't see Robbie give much at all in this fight. From the start of the fight, he did come out a little bit aggressive. He tried to close the distance with Magny. He tried to take him down, but Magny was wise to it. He was able to counter pretty much everything Robbie was throwing at him. As soon as Robbie takes Magny down in the first round, Magny gets right back up on his feet. So it wasn't even close for a secured takedown. He got him down, but he didn't really keep him there. Magny just used his strength and pushed his way back up. From here, Magny stuffs another Lawler takedown, and Lawler is in the crotch sniffing position where his head is in between Magny's legs. And while he's in this position, Magny just rains down elbows. He's terrorizing the back, using his elbows, and just beats him up till the end of the round. In round 2, he's able to take Robbie down and keep him neutralized. This was really reminiscent of the Covington versus Lawler fight, where Covington was just taking Robbie down at will, taking his back, sitting on top of him, really not doing too much damage, but just making sure Robbie just has 0 offensive game. You're not going to get much damage throwing punches behind your back, And Magny was able to do that. He was able to take Robbie's back, and even though he wasn't able to get the rear naked choke, he was able to keep it busy enough so the referee can keep him there and to win the round. Moving on to round 3, we do see Magny use that 6-inch reach that he had, the reach advantage, to keep Robbie at bay and pretty much just jab him out till the fight ends. At this point, it seems like Magny is understanding his game. It sets him up to compete for a top 10 spot in the welterweight division, and if he's able to string a few in a row, he's going to be able to pull together a Masvidal-esque title run late in his career. Now for Robbie, he didn't look good. It's going to be hard to see where he goes from here. For him to remain relevant, he's not going to be able to stay at 170 pounds or at the UFC. Unless he's willing to just take those fights for paydays. Obviously, being with the promotion for so long, the more fights you get a little bit of a pay boost. But for him to stay relevant, if he wants to compete for a title, he'll be better off going to Bellator. With a little bit step down in competition, a little bit less killers, because the 170-pound division at the UFC is murderous. Top 10, any of those fighters could win a fight for the belt at any given day. That's how dangerous they are. So if he wants to remain relevant, probably a move would be what's best for him. Moving on to the next fight, we see Alexa Grasso outstrike Ji Leon Kim and take the decision win. Grasso was making a 125-pound debut and was fighting to get in the top 15 in the division. Kim was coming off a win, and she was just trying to keep her name in the rankings and obviously propel herself forward. In this fight, Kim came in 2 inches taller. She did have a 6-inch reach advantage, and you would expect her to use that reach advantage to keep Grasso at bay, but Grasso really did a good job executing her game plan perfectly. She managed her distance well, moving in and out of boxing range and keeping her guard really high and tight. This was perfect against Kim because Kim's someone who focuses on the head. Only 11 of her 188 strikes attempted were to the body or legs. So by Grasso keeping that guard high, she was able to make sure that she kept her chin safe and countered when the time was right. Now, Grasso, being as young as she is really primed for propulsion in the future. For her to be able to show such distance management in a new weight class and against a taller fighter, she was able to pretty much do whatever she wanted this fight. She would get in and out of boxing range, making sure that she stayed far enough so that 6-inch reach advantage wasn't affecting her, and then get close enough to make sure she pieced up Kim. Her striking ability and her distance management was just great that fight. Moving on to the fight of the night, we see Ricardo Lamas beat Bill Algio by decision. Coming in, the former title challenger Lamas had lost 3 of his last 4. He had a year off to work to get his body right, and it seemed like it really, really helped him. As for Algio, he makes his UFC debut on 6 days' notice. He's no stranger to the fight game. Algio was the ROC featherweight champion from 2017 to 2019, and the Cage Fury FC featherweight champion in 2016. So he does have great experience coming in. In round 1, it was a show to begin with. Algio started off strong as well as showboating mid-fight, making it all the more exciting. This was just such a fun fight to watch. It was a really tightly contested round with Lamas slightly outstriking Algio 47-41. We did see Lamas get that takedown in the first round, so you could probably give that round to him. What really catches the eye and makes this fight more exciting is what happens in between the round. Now, fighting is always fun, but it's always 10 times more fun if there is a little bit of heat between the fighters. In between rounds, they didn't want to get out of each other's face. They were still in each other's face, and they were talking shit. They were making sure that they knew that, hey, I'm not going to get out of your way. And it just made the second round even more exciting to watch. Obviously, going into the second round, Bill Algio really seemed to turn it on. He does have a slow starting kind of trait, where he has finished 4 wins in the second round by rear naked choke. So he's somebody who tends to get going in that second round. He was able to land a brutal knee as Lamas was closing the distance, and Lamas seemed to lose where he was at the moment. Was able to recover, backpedal, make sure he stayed out of range, covered up high. He didn't end up on his back or anything, but it definitely still shook him. From this point, Algio did a great job getting a takedown on Lamas and keeping him at bay the entire round. It almost seemed like he was really, really closing in to the getting a finish, but luckily for Lamas, he was able to survive the round and take it into round 3. Now, round 3 is where Lamas really showed his experience. After getting torched in round 2, he started landing well on Algio. He was able to take him down really soon in the round and get into the half guard and then into the full mount. From here, he gets some nasty elbows in, and he tries to threaten some submissions, but you can hear his corner just yelling at him, "Don't worry about the submissions, just go for the ground and pound." Now, this was a great fight. Obviously, it was fight of the night, but you could really see the damage that Lamas took in this fight. In the post-fight interview, he does contemplate, retirement, mentioning the issues ongoing in Cuba, and it would be really interesting to see if this is where he calls it a career. And, it's a fight of the night performance. It's late in his career, well past his ability to challenge for the title. It would be a good fight for him to retire. It would be nice to see him fight maybe one more fight, so he's able to get the farewell that he deserves, being a former title challenger and a staple of the division. But whatever works best for him would be nice to see. For Algio, since he was coming off a short notice, his stock seems to definitely rose in this fight, even if it was a loss. He showed great gamesmanship and charisma in the fight, and he could potentially be an exciting draw. He's somebody who is like Kevin Holland. He talks mid-fight, he showboats mid-fight, and he does these things where it's entertaining to watch him in and out of the ring. So he's somebody where you just want to watch him fight just because he's like, oh, what is he going to do this fight? He might do something different. He might showboat. He might taunt the opponent. He might get in his face. So he has a well-rounded game. Like I said, he is a former champion in multiple promotions. His striking was really good. He has really good distance management, and he has good groundwork too. So it was a pretty well-rounded fight for Algio. Like I said, on only 6 days' notice. And if he has more time to prepare for these fights than 6 days, we can definitely see him competing a lot heavier in the fight. Moving on to in my opinion, the second best fight of the night. It was my pick for fight of the night. It was the fight of the night until the Algio Lamas fight, but hey, second best, we'll take that. We see Maki Coconut Bomb Spitolo take on Impa Kasaganai. Now, like I said, this was my pick for the fight of the night, and it definitely delivered. Impa comes in at 7-0, off of a win on Dana White's Contender Series, and Maki Pitolo comes off a loss where he didn't really take much damage, but obviously he got submitted. Both fighters come in on less than 3 weeks' notice, so they both had about the same time to prepare to come into the fight. Now, round 1 was pretty close. Now, Maki ended up with 31 strikes, and Impa ended up with 28. So this round could have gone either way, but Impa was able to inflict a lot more damage than Maki. He did bust him open, so obviously there's the cosmetic factor. If you're able to make the other fighter bleed, it seems like you would have done a little bit more damage. But you could have definitely gave Maki that first round. Now, getting into the second round, you really see Impa, start to turn it on. He was a little bit timid, obviously this being his first UFC fight. He didn't want to overextend himself. So every time he would pop Maki with a shot, instead of following up and rushing in, trying to get the knockout, he would just kind of sit at bay, take his shots, sit at bay. Because Maki has those heavy hands. They don't call him coconut bombs for nothing because he throws those bombs. And if you watch that fight, you'll know he has those heavy hands. But in the second round, Impa starts to show why he's undefeated. He's able to outstrike him 30-19, and overall throws 20 more shots. So he was the busier of the fighter. He did inflict real damage, and he was able to really defend himself well, keeping himself turtled up in his high guard. And he threatened to take down. So it was good to see him show both parts of the game as far as the ground and on the feet. Now for Maki, he did show good perseverance. Even though he was taking severe damage and heavy shots, he was rolling really well with the punches. So those shots weren't putting him to sleep and turning his chin. But in round 3, we definitely saw Impa take full control of that fight. He was able to continually damage Maki to the point where he tore the gauge tape off of Maki's ear, and the referee obviously stopped it for a second and pulled it off, but he was definitely able to finish that fight strong and continue himself as an undefeated fighter. Now at 8-0, he could be a legit threat for the future. He's still young, and for him to have such a well-rounded game and being able to take it to the ground, he didn't do this fight, but in the Contender Series, he showed his ability to wrestle, and he has heavy hands, he has a tight guard, and he has really good footwork. So for him, it would be really nice to see him continue to grow as a fighter, for him to continue to propel himself into contention, be able to fight for a ranking one day. As for Maki, he didn't have a bad performance. He just got outstriked, He really has heavy hands. He's still 29 years old, so he's a little bit young. He's about to hit his prime or close to his prime. If he wants to make a run and try to get himself into the rankings, it's going to have to be now. He's not going to be able to wait much longer, unless he stays as busy as he does, of course. But for him, you'd want to see him start to mix up the game a little bit more. We already know that he's phenomenal on the feet. He has good footwork, he has good striking, but it seems like his ground game is really lacking. If he's able to threaten a ground game and then go with those shots, that would make their opponent think about something else other than those heavy hands, and therefore those hands will be more effective since he has a more well-roundedness. But we can go ahead and see how Impa is going to go moving forward. He is 8-0, so we'll see how he will bear moving forward. Now, moving on to the next fight, we do see Zach Cummings take on Alessio Deshiriko. Neither fighter have actually ever been KO'd, and these guys both put on a show. In round one, we see Deshiriko really show off his striking capability. He throws 15 more shots than Cummings did, and many expected Cummings to want to take the fight to the ground, being that he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But Cummings didn't really try that much to take it to the ground. He did shoot once or twice, if I'm right, but he didn't really care to take it to the ground. And it was really funny seeing Zach get hit, because every time he would get hit, he would smile. Now, I don't know if it was like the 8-inch beard hanging off the chin that makes him so impervious to those face punches, but whatever it is, he has a really hard head, and he's able to keep himself in the fight even while taking some heavy shots. The third round is really where things get exciting. This fight comes down to the last minute. They were going tit for tat on their striking. They were both landing pretty good shots, and it came down to about the last second. Now, with about 5 seconds to go, Alessio comes in and tries to go with a left hand. Dropping his right hand, as he leans in for that left hand, Cummings hits him with a perfect head kick. Now, that head kick came right at the buzzer, so he wasn't able to do any follow-up shots, but it did really, I think that won him the round, because it was a knockdown, and for the referees, they're going to take that into account. Alessio wasn't able to stand up straight. He kind of stood up, stumbled his way to the ground, and didn't know where he was, didn't know how to get to the bench, and Zach ended up winning the fight 2-1. Now, for both of these fighters, they definitely put on a show. They're not highly ranked yet, and it would be hard to see them trying to get into the rankings at their point of careers. Obviously, Deshiriko does have a little bit more time, being only 30 years old. But for Zach Cummings, he's 36, so he's a little bit older there. Maybe just for him to fight maybe a little bit of a heavier grappler, being a Brazilian black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. It would be an exciting fight for him to see. And for Alessio, it would be nice to see him fight somebody that has the same kind of striking ability as him. Somebody that can really take those shots, just kind of like Zach Cummings, because it was a really exciting fight moving forward. Now, for Cummings, it was really nice to see him kind of show some gamesmanship in this fight, because every time he would get hit, he would smile. And it's kind of a Jorge Masvidal-esque, where you just want to show it with a smile or with a tongue or whatever you want to do, just to kind of be like, hey, you got me, but you didn't hit me hard enough to knock me out. It was really fun to just watch that fight. It was a really exciting fight overall. Now, moving on to the hometown fight, for any of you guys that are in South Florida, we do see Bruce Leroy Caceres coming out of Miami, Florida, to take on Austin Springer. Now, for Alex, he's coming off 2 wins in a row where he showed it that his game is still improving. At 11-10 in the UFC, he definitely wanted to prove that he still belongs. Caceres has gone the full distance of 4 of his last 5 fights. And he has 3 wins by KO and then 5 by submission. So he does have a really well-rounded game. As for Austin Springer, he was on 2 days' notice, and this is his UFC debut. He's made it to the round 3 in his last 4 fights, so he does show good toughness. And he is on a 3-fight winning streak. He was a last-minute replacement. Now for Springer, he's been fighting for 13 years, and he finally made it to the UFC, and you get it on 2 days' notice. So that is a little bit of a hard call. Obviously, you don't want to say no at that point when you haven't had the opportunity before. But it was a little bit of a hard call for him to take this fight. Now he's finished 9 of his 12 wins, and 4 of them were first-round knockouts. So he does have the ability to come in, take care of business, and leave quickly. Bruce Leroy but just came in and showed that he belonged. He had the longer time to prepare, so that really showed in this fight. Heading into round 1, we see that in a short amount of time, Austin really tries to go for a takedown, but it was a very sloppy takedown. He makes a mistake here. He digs really way too low into the ground, keeps his head almost close to the mat, to the point where Bruce Leroy is able to sprawl, get to the back, secure the rear naked choke, and that was the end of that. It was a really quick fight that ended quickly for Bruce, and it was really good to see him to stay on the winning side of things. Now winning 3 straight, he's able to try to make the run to the rankings if he wants to. He showed that he's able to win against a young Chase Hooper. He showed against an Austin Hubbard, who was a previous champion in other promotions. So he does have the ability to go ahead and make it in the future. Now for Austin, obviously he only had 2 days notice to take this fight. So you definitely want to see him get another chance coming in. But you would also want to see him come out, if he is going to take this fight on 2-day notice, have a little bit more of an ability to come in and at least try to make it a little more competitive. It wasn't really a competitive fight for him. Wasn't the best of showings for him, but hopefully Dana will give him another chance and that he'll be able to make it back in. Now, moving on to the next fight, we see another rising star come into the scene. Brady was undefeated at 12-0, 100% takedown defense, and he's 50% on his takedowns that he's attempted. He's a former Cage Fury FC welterweight champion from 2017 to 2019, and he's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now for Christian Aguilera, he made his UFC debut on June 14, and 10 of his last 14 wins are first-round knockouts. He doesn't really care much for the ground game. He doesn't have much takedown stats. Now, Brady starts off with really good showing with the low kicks. The heavy hands were flying in this one. But Brady showed his championship experience with his good striking and his pace and his distance management. As a former champion, you definitely tend to have championship tendencies because you're fighting the highest level of fighters at the promotion, even if it's a lower level. And Brady showed why he's undefeated. Aguilera does a good job staying light on his feet, but he gets cut up early by Brady. He ends up taking a hand to the face and obviously shows some blood. And Brady shows some really good leg kicks, which we talked about earlier. After closing their distance, he goes straight into a power double leg takedown, and he has no resistance from Aguilera. From here, he passes from full guard to half guard, and he does a really good job grounded pound, pushing him up against the cage, making sure that Aguilera doesn't have the room to kind of wiggle out and try to attempt any submissions. We already know he doesn't have ground game, but he does a good job pushing him up against the fence and making sure that he pretty much uses that fence as an extra arm, an extra limb to keep him enclosed and finish the round with ground and pound. Heading into round 2, Brady shows a good job. He's patient, until Aguilera starts to throw some combos close. And once he gets close, Brady just takes him down again. Now from this guard, he gets into the full mount, and then from the full mount, he gets into a guillotine. They sprawl, and Brady actually rolls over, continues with the guillotine, and you see Aguilera start to squirm because he doesn't want to tap. But you see him start to squirm, try to really get out of there, and then he just goes out cold. And then that's good night for him. Definitely was a good showing by Brady, and definitely shout out to Paul Felder, who does train with Brady, saying that the fight was over before the fight actually ends. So it was cool to see somebody who trains with somebody who's fighting in the ring say how hard that guillotine is. Now this really cements him as a prospect that he could really crack the top 15. He has good striking, he has really heavy hands, he has good grappling as shown by the choke that he gets here, and then on top of that, that leg kick is a great weapon for anybody who's a superior striker. For him to be able to have such a well-rounded game, being a former champion and being undefeated, we see that he's prime to make a run and get into the top 15. Now, for Aguilera, it's hard to see where he goes from here. He didn't really show much, but it would definitely be nice to see him fight somebody maybe with less of a ground game, just so he doesn't have to deal with that. A step down in competition, obviously, being that he lost the fight, for him to remain maybe competitive or just to put on a good fight in the future. Now, going on to the second fight on the card, we see Emily Spitfire Whitmire take on Pauliana Viana. And Pauliana was a jungle fight strawweight champion. She doesn't have a decision win, but that's because all of her wins has been finishes. She is on a 3-fight losing streak, and a crazy stat is she's 0-3 outside of Brazil, so she seems to really thrive off the hometown crowd. She does come in with 9 first-round finishes, so she's really good at finishing quickly. Now, all 3 of Whitmire's losses have come by submission, so this was really a prime opportunity for Pauliana to show her grappling skills. Now, they both had a year off in from their last fight, so they had really good time to prepare, really good time to grow their game. Now, while Pauliana does have a win over Amanda Ribas, Whitmire lost to her by submission. Now, Whitmire did face a much more polished Ribas last year versus Pauliana did in 2015. Obviously, Ribas is close, or is a ranked contender and a pretty skilled fighter, but Whitmire did face the more polished version of her. Now, both fighters came in quite aggressive. Viana does a good job showing starting a lighting on her feet, and Whitmire does get a takedown, and she ends up in half guard. Now, from this position, Viana is able to pull guard back, and she does a good job throwing elbows and getting elbows from the bottom. Now, from this position, she's able to trap Whitmire's arm that she was leaning on the ground, and rolls through and gets an armbar submission. Now, that was a really, really good showing for Viana. It shows that she does have the ability to take the fight, even if she's on her back, and work within her guard. With bouncing back from 3 straight losses, which is tough, you don't want to get your contract terminated. Maybe another top 20 opponent would sue her at this point of her career. Moving on to the opening fight of the night, and this was a great way to open the card. Mallory Martin comes in with wins in Invicta, LFA, and Dana White's Contender Series. And she comes in winning 4 of her last 5 fights. As for Hannah Cipher, she stays busy, and this is already her 4th fight this year, so she does have a knack for fighting a lot of times. Maybe it helps her keep her flow. She does have 5 first-round knockouts and 4 first-round finishes. She did miss a weight by a pound, which might have played a factor into this fight for her wearing down. Obviously, with the weight cut, if it's something that's really taxing on the body, even if you're able to rehydrate and recarb up the next day and fill that weight back up, it's something that taxes you a lot more if you're unable to make that weight, and you don't want to give up 30% of your purse to the next fighter either. Now, for Mallory, this was her 2nd UFC appearance, and she comes in winning 5 of her last 6. As for Hannah, she starts off really well. She starts off light on her feet, and she starts moving in and out of Mallory's strike zone, and she continues to circle really, really well. Now, Cipher uses that left jab to really kind of set things up, making sure that Martin is at bay and at her range. And early in the fight, she sets up a really good left jab to a right overhand, and that right overhand passes through that left guard and is able to get Mallory right on the chin. Now, after she gets on a knockdown, she goes and she hits her hammer fist, and when she hits that hammer fist, Mallory's legs go limp. At this point, a lot of referees would have stopped the fight, but luckily for Mallory, that she was allowed to continue in that fight. She was able to continue, and that second hammer fist that came in actually might have woken her up. Mallory closes the guard, and Cipher is able to pick her up and goes for a slam. And she's able to stay just busy enough to make sure that she doesn't get the TKO loss. As for Cipher, she did a really good job in this first round. She hits her with clean hooks on the exit of the clinches, and Martin just seems to do just enough to stay alive every time the ref asks for action. She's able to pull guard and barely survive the first round to finish that first round. The first round ended with a 46-13 strike advantage, for Ciphers and probably a 10-8 round. Now, for round 2, Martin closes the distance immediately, and she pushes Ciphers back into the cage. She's able to pull her down into half guard, and she pins down her arm with a modified, half guard, half crucifix position, and she's able to really subdue that left arm and punch her right in the face a lot of times. From here, Ciphers obviously wants to turtle up, and she doesn't want to get hit in the face. And Martin go ahead and she locks in that rear naked choke, and she wins the fight. Now this performance gave Mallory Martin a performance of the night bonus, and rightfully so. She came back from a 10-8 round. She was almost knocked, pretty much. I think her lights went out, and she was able to turn the fight around. She fights at the same gym as lightweight champ Khabib Nurmagomedov, ex-champions Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez. So maybe it's some of that championship mindset at that gym that was ingrained to her to show that great composure as the fight continued. At only 26 years old, we can see her working her way up in the division and into the rankings in the future. I want to thank you guys for all tuning into the show. Like I said, we will be doing a giveaway for anyone who made it this far into the show. It will be free to enter, so for 3 steps to qualify for a $5 Amazon gift card. Once the show gets bigger, obviously we'll be raising the giveaway amount. But the 3 steps you got to do first, if there's any likes, dislikes, or comments on how I can make the show better for you, please leave a comment below. This is obviously a show for you guys. We appreciate you coming in and checking it out. And if you liked it, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for future videos. Second thing you got to do, you got to share the video on Twitter and tag 3 MMA fans that you would think would like the show. Once we're able to crack 250 views on the video, we'll be doing the giveaway, the drawing. Finally, follow me at 3-Piece Combo at Twitter, and when you're done with all that, send me a screenshot with all the steps and we'll put your name into a drawing. Thank you guys for checking out the 3-Piece Combo Show, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Until next time, stay blessed.